Hello, and welcome to Mental Health Matters. I'm your host, Liz Lang. Each week on this podcast, we will break down various aspects of mental health. We are so excited you're here and hope you enjoy this week's episode. Hey guys, Liz Lang here with Jeremiah and Selina Woodruff from Core Connection. And this week we are going to start a series on the Dopamine Dilemma, which is a fantastic series that we are going to apply to teens, but also very much applies to adults. And before we get into that, Selina has this week's parenting moment.
Yeah, so as we're recording this, we're still in the month of May, and I know there's lots of talk about the month of May. I've seen Maycember, it's called, and lots of thoughts and feelings about the month of May and what we think about it. But I actually came across somebody posted about how May is actually all these great reasons that we get to celebrate our kids. And she has shifted her thinking in seeing how she's so grateful that she always wants to celebrate her kids and acknowledge their accomplishments and be proud of them. And so she's so grateful that she has so many opportunities in May that she's able to have that chance to celebrate her kids. So I love that perspective, and I have been sharing it with all my friends that I'm able to share that with. But I have tried to make that shift in my mind that even when it's hard and crazy and I don't know how we're going to eat dinner on some nights, that I am excited that we have these opportunities that I get to celebrate my kids and their accomplishments and the goodness and all the hard work they've done all year.
I love that because, the month of May it does feel crazy with the end of school, and there's sports activities, there's end of year award ceremonies, and then there's, whatever it is, there's something going on. It's graduation season for a lot of people. And I love this idea of choosing where to put your focus, because it's kind of like what you've said before time and time again. You're still having the same experience. The experience isn't changing, but the way you're thinking about it is.
Yeah, it's much more enjoyable when we are excited and looking forward to those opportunities. We might be tired and staying up too late and have cranky kids, but it sure has made a shift in the enjoyment of those opportunities.
And it's okay to admit it's not a good day. It's okay to admit this day sucks. This is not a good day. And that's fine. I think you should acknowledge. I think it's healthy to acknowledge that you're having a crappy day. But, there can be good in the misery too. It's all part of life.
I think that such a big piece of that is the power of the mind and the power of thought. My dad used to always say, a person is pretty much as happy as he makes up his mind to be. And I love that because there's a lot of reality to that. And where we put our focus is where we're going to be. So if we focus on how miserable and difficult it is to get to all the different events that happen in May, if we have teenage kids especially, or even younger kids, then we're just going to be miserable. But I love that Selina shared that we can change our mindset and our focus becomes celebrating our kids and what they've done and what they are doing and who they are. Definitely can shift the perspective.
All right. So helping teens navigate screens, rewards, and emotional balance. So here's a question for parents to consider, and really all of us to consider. Why does my teen always want more? Why is your teen, or why is my teen, is what you can ask yourself, glued to that phone? And why can I not get them off of it? Why are they bored after 5 minutes of getting off of their phone? So I think it would be a good idea to start by explaining what is going on and why these phones are so addictive and why teens just love that little box that they get to hold in their hands. So walk me through what's going on.
Yeah. And I know we've talked about this on the podcast before. We did the series on the anxious generation, and we've kind of talked about these things in the past. But the problem I see with social media, videos, with screens in general, video games, is that they really are designed to keep you in it and not for short periods of time. And so teens, adults, or anyone who grabs a screen, we're getting that dopamine hit, and it's very rapid and it's fast paced and it's moving and it's quick. And we want to spend the time there because we get the dopamine hit and the dopamine feels good. And dopamine, I think we've referred to it often as like the pleasure chemical, which is really inaccurate. Dopamine is more about motivation and anticipation. So, for example, if we're going to go to see a movie, we're going to get a dopamine hit because we're excited. And that kind of tells our brain, hey, I want to go see that movie. It's going to be fun. It's going to be a good time. I enjoy being at the movies. I'm going to get, some popcorn and maybe a soda, and I'm going to have a good time with my friends or whoever watching this movie. That's the dopamine. And then when the movie's over, we think, oh, that was a great time. That's the dopamine speaking. And so it motivates us, right? It motivates us to want to do the different things that we engage in. I think the real struggle here is that when we use the cell phones, we get unhealthy amounts of dopamine very, very quickly as we move from video to video. If we look at things like Facebook Reels or YouTube Shorts, they limit how long those are allowed to be. And they do that for a reason, because if we allow them to be long videos, we start to dissipate some of that dopamine and we'll move on and do something different. But if they're super short, we get the dopamine hit and then we go to the next one, we get the dopamine hit, and it just keeps coming and coming. And then we just get stuck in it. And so pretty soon, our normal, slower activities aren't so fun anymore. If we think about, a child playing a video game on a phone versus a board game we have to take turns and we wait, versus on a video game, we're just constantly engaged in the game, right? So those slower activities become more difficult to enjoy because we're not getting that same volume of dopamine.
And, to be clear also, like with video games, there's nothing wrong with letting your kid play some video games. It's not always a bad thing. And, it's also not terrible if you have an older teen on Facebook, right? So these are not the problem. So these are tools. These are merely tools. These are ways that we can entertain ourselves. It's all about how we use them. And when they often cross into that problematic behavior, which is maybe your teen is not getting their chores done, they're not doing their homework because they're just sitting on their phone or they're just sitting playing video games. That's when it becomes a problem, because we have to accept the reality that we live in a digital age. We live in a world that is digital. Screens are a part of our life, and that's not a bad thing. It's all about managing it. So, we have to help teens manage the dopamine, right? And we have to help them create healthy boundaries for themselves.
Well, and that's where the high stimulation comes in, right? It's high stimulation from those notifications, from the constant changing of the reels or the post and the gaming and those sorts of things are all high stimulation. So when you have that high stimulation always active, when you don't have it, your real life just seems really boring and isn't as rewarding as the quick dopamine that you're getting from participating in those activities.
Yeah, it really does make those everyday experiences less rewarding for kids. They're already wired for novelty and social connection, for excitement, reward seeking. And then in modern life, we've added social media gaming, short videos, constant notifications that Selena was talking about. And we put all that in there. And now we're getting this massive stimulation in the brain. So your everyday conversations and experiences, taking a walk outside or going on a hike, just doesn't sound as exciting. And I appreciate, Liz, that you brought up the fact that, hey, all this stuff isn't bad, and we're never going to say that. There's great things we can do. The technology is wonderful, and it's enhanced our lives in wonderful ways, but with that comes some consequences. And maybe we should say responsibility. We have a greater responsibility to manage what we do and how we spend our time, and a greater responsibility as parents to teach that to our children, so that they could be productive and utilize these great tools and resources in a way that enhances their lives instead of brings them down.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so here's a good example. A teen says there's nothing to do. They're bored. I'm bored. How often do we hear that as parents? And I feel like often our parents want to respond with, "Hi, bored. I'm mom," with "Go figure out something to do. Go read a book or go draw or go find something to do to entertain yourself." So tell me why that's not a helpful response and what we could do instead. or what is really going on here when our teen is saying, I'm bored?
Well, if you're having that experience and they're walking off of or coming off of, 2 hours on social media or 2 hours watching YouTube shorts or whatever it is, and they're walking away from that 2 hours of that high intensity stimulation, what's really happening is those other things just seem miserable. They're flat. They're not stimulating for them. And so they are bored. And they do feel like there's nothing to do, especially if maybe you've set some time limits on a phone or something like that. Oh, the phone cut off. Now, the idea of going and doing homework or playing outside just doesn't feel very exciting to me. And that's what's really happening. That's why it's not helpful to say, oh yeah, you got all these things you could do. Well, that doesn't sound good to them. And so here we want to talk to them a little bit about resetting. What helps you feel better? What's going to help you reset and kind of change your perspective on things a little bit and allow them to explore that. And we'll get more into it, but there's a lot of things that we can do to work with our teens to start teaching them this emotional responsibility to manage what's happening inside, to manage their usage of phones, and to move forward in a healthy way to find balance in their lives.
I think I said this in the last podcast, but let's practice being bored. Let's get really good at being bored. So what opportunities can you have in your child's schedule that they can be okay to be bored or to not have other things that are stimulating them, that they can learn how to be okay in their body when they don't have anything to do?
Driving is a good one. That's immediately what comes to mind. And I'm not talking about long road trips necessarily, because good grief, if you're doing a long road trip and there's 12 hours, by all means, bust out the screens and help keep those kids entertained while you're all confined to a small space. But if you're driving 30 minutes somewhere, take the screens away. Be bored. Make them do something, or we're all going to sit and be quiet, right? There's endless things that you can do. That was just what immediately popped into my mind.
Well, boredom is a great tool. Boredom enhances creativity and imagination building, right? When we're bored and we're left with our own thoughts and we can imagine things or think about things that maybe we wouldn't think about if we were holding onto that little device. And even a 12-hour road trip, I don't want my kids on screens the whole time. It's not good for them. Maybe they put on a movie and watch a movie to kill some of the time, but there are games you could play. I mean, I remember traveling on long road trips with my family, and we played games and looked for different things. And, today most kids don't even see the world go by them, and they don't experience what it's like to travel because they don't see anything. They're staring at a screen. That dopamine, again, is rewarding them, but looking outside and seeing the mountains and imagining yourself in the mountains or what it might be like to be there, or driving through a big city and looking at the architecture, that just seems so flat and uninteresting and not highly stimulating. And so it becomes difficult. And practice is going to be helpful in these kinds of situations and allowing our kids to slow down and reset a little bit and not be stuck in these highly stimulating activities.
And it's a challenge. They're going to fight it. Let's be honest. They're not going to be happy when you say, this is what we're doing. And well, it's okay. Let them pitch the fit. Let them be mad. But, I think where parents sometimes can go wrong is when they start to demonize the screens. And this is so easy to do because, you see your teen turning into what looks like a brain dead zombie that's only capable. I think I saw a meme about this once. I think it was like a Babylon Bee or some satire site that was like brain dead teen only capable of moving thumbs and rolling eyes or something like that. Right. And so you're looking at your teen and you're like, what is wrong with you? Okay. So saying that isn't helpful, first of all. So, we don't want to just demonize the screen and just say phones are ruining your life, because first of all, you have a phone as well. So, that's not really going to work. And there's a lot of great ways to utilize the phone. So what's the better balance?
Yeah, exactly. We aren't trying to manage and control our kids. We're trying to teach them life skills. We look to the future. Who do we want them to be? How do we want them to have their lives be, right? And teach them those skills. And so we want their skill in their life later to be like, hey, I can balance having a phone, having these, these fun things, extra things that we have, social media, gaming, all those different things that are going to take our attention. So how do I balance that in my life? How do I have that balance in my life to be able to use my phone and be able to function without my phone also?
Yeah, I think instead of saying something like phones are ruining your life, this is a great opportunity for some connection for
Mm-hmm.
us as parents to sit down with them and say, hey, let's explore together a little bit about how different types of activities might affect your mood or your energy. And so we can ask the questions, we can go through this process. What are they interested in, right? Maybe they play a sport. How do you feel after, practice at volleyball? Or how do you feel after you finished the track meet? How do you feel after you're hanging out with your friends and you're doing things with them? And how do you feel after scrolling? And this isn't a judgment zone. This isn't for you to like throw it in their face. Okay. When we're having these conversations, like Selena said, what we're doing is we're trying to teach them and help them learn to become responsible adults who act with purpose in their lives. And as they explore these different things, they'll start to come to this realization and recognition that, oh, I notice when I spend 4 hours on a Saturday scrolling that I don't feel very good at all, that nothing is motivating, nothing's exciting. I don't even want to go hang out with my friends versus, man, after that basketball game, I was on top of the world and it was exciting. So we can build activities around those responses that they give us and help them learn how to shift gears and when to say, hey, this is enough and I need to do something different and change the outcomes of what I'm getting based on my behaviors.
Well, and some kids, I mean, your kids and what works, right? But some kids knowing those facts and knowing, like some of our kids knowing that, hey, do you know companies like build apps so that you are addicted to them, so that you can't walk away from it? So to them, that's like, oh, shoot, I don't want that in my life. I don't want them to have control of me. And so it helps them to be aware of what's happening and what they're experiencing. And so they make different choices based on that knowledge and experience. But even just understanding that dopamine is what is affecting your brain. And that's why you want that, and you want that quick, fun experience. And it makes sense why you don't want to do homework or things that seem less exciting. Hiking, playing outside, those seem slow and boring, or however they want to explain that. But maybe taking the time to explain what is happening and what is going on in their brain, and that's why they're making the choices that they are. Sometimes that's helpful for teenagers to understand what's going on to make those choices.
I think that's a really important point, Selena. As we're going through this process, I wonder how often we miss the opportunity to help kids understand what's happening, right? When I'm talking about helping evaluate how different activities affect their mood or their energy, kids are not going to have the capacity most of the time all on their own to say, oh, when I scroll for, an hour on Instagram, I don't feel great. That's probably not a good activity for me to participate in. They're not going to put that together most of the time. And that's where our responsibility comes in to help them learn and understand that. And so we can share with them, how these things are developed. It's something we've done with our kids. We've talked with them about how social media companies will hire people to specifically build this stuff that understand the psychology of the human brain to keep them involved in it, because the more time that we have in the app, the more money these companies make. And I get it. They want to make money, whatever, but the cost can be really tremendous for our youth, especially.
And, also realizing they may not get it right away, because I think another thing that's happening is oftentimes when you're trying to explain this to them, or when you say, okay, hey, it's time to be done, they're feeling these, they feel irritated because we're taking away their dopamine. They're going to mislabel what they're feeling, right? So they're going to feel, they're going to feel blah. What they're probably initially going to attribute that emotion to is mom and dad are just trying to control my life and they don't want me to have any fun, right? So,
Yeah, for sure.
and which is why it's important to let them express the emotions. Like, let them be frustrated when you do scale it back, or when they do get mad that you say, okay, it's time to be done. And they just roll their eyes or whatever. Yeah, let them be frustrated. It's okay. Eventually, over time, they will hopefully see the pattern and recognize, oh, yeah, I do feel better when I give myself a time limit. Okay, so your teen says, I don't care about anything. So your teen just seems unmotivated, and they just flat out don't care about their homework that needs to be done or the garbage that needs taken out. Oftentimes, parents will attribute that to just their teen is lazy.
Well, that's what it looks
Well,
like on the outside, right?
yes.
You're just lazy. You just want to lay around and be on your phone, get up and do something. Of course, that's not helpful, right?
Mm-hmm.
Nobody wants to hear that. And maybe a better way to approach that when you run into something like that is, you seem really disconnected. What's difficult for you right now? What's been hard? And so now we invite connection, right? And opportunity to explore, and we're being curious, right? That curious word that we so often talk about, so that we can explore what's going on with them, and so they can explore it, because they haven't. I guarantee you they haven't explored it themselves. And when we ask that question, they go, what is hard? It feels really hard to get up and take the trash out, Dad. It's overflowing. Or, it feels really hard to pick up my room, Mom. I just don't want to do it. It seems awful. And so now we can start having that conversation, right? About why we're not caring about anything, and what's happening kind of behind the scenes for them.
Yeah. And, also recognizing that teens, they also experience dopamine different than adults do. When you said, oh, yeah, taking the trash out, that doesn't sound exciting. It made me think of, and maybe this was a bit of a squirrel brain moment, but it made me think of getting a new vacuum and how exciting that can feel to an adult. Right? It's dopamine. It's a dopamine hit. You're anticipating this new, and teens, they just don't care. And honestly, you can't make them care. Like, you are never going to convince your teen that taking out the trash is rewarding. We might get a dopamine hit because as an adult, because it feels satisfying. There's something satisfying about, an empty laundry basket, or, a fresh bag in the trash can. As adults, we find it satisfying. You are never going to convince your teen of that. They just don't care. And that's okay. So work with what you've got. Come to their level, work with them where they are, rather than trying to force them to where you think they should be.
Well, I think it's important to note too that dopamine comes in a lot of different forms. Like you're saying, as an adult, we get excited when we get a new vacuum. But dopamine comes when your Amazon package arrives, when you eat your chocolate almonds. It comes in lots of things, right?
We get the notification on our phone. We get a text message from a friend.
Yeah, exactly. So dopamine comes in a lot of different forms. It's not just social media and gaming and those sort of things.
And I would argue that a child could have dopamine from getting the trash out. They accomplish something. It feels good to get it done, especially when it's their responsibility. They don't have to think about it anymore. The levels are just going to be really low and more normal. When I say normal, I mean more baseline for what we would have happen in day-to-day life if it weren't for these high intensity activities that we're so engaged in. And it's not going to be the same level. You're going to get more of a dopamine hit over a clean house than as a mom than your teenage child will. But I think that they still could have a small dopamine hit, and moving that into those more normalized activities and having that more often, I think does help create some balance in their lives.
Yeah. So here's another really good scenario when it feels like your teen never wants to do anything with you anymore, right? So maybe the family's wanting more connection. You're like, hey, we're going to play this card game. Why don't you come join us? Nah, I'm good. So rather than coming at them with, well, you never want to do anything with us, walk me through a better approach to that.
Well, this is a great example to start working in levels of more moderate dopamine for your teen, right? So here we could say something like, man, I really miss spending time with you. What's something that we actually enjoy doing together? And so now if they can come up with something, they're actually going to get the dopamine hit when we plan something together that says, hey, I really liked when we went fishing together, or if we went shopping together, or, had a date with mom or a date with dad, or whatever it looks like, right? Now there's that anticipation piece, right? We're going to get the dopamine from the anticipation. And once we do that and it's over, maybe we went on a little shopping trip together and we're able to get some new shoes or whatever it is. And when it's all done and we're on our way home, they're going to get that dopamine hit again that reinforces that, hey, I enjoyed this. That was a good activity. That was something that brought me joy. And so again, just moving that back into a balanced area of dopamine.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So, which ties in really well with emotional regulation and dopamine, right? So oftentimes fast stimulation, when you're getting that, when you're doing the Facebook reels, or like when you're doing something, maybe it's like a game like this. It's like this tiles game that kids play. I think could be a good example. It's like you hear the song, and you have to tap the right tile at the right time. That's a major dopamine hit. It is so fast paced. Your brain is so engaged, and you want to just keep doing it over and over and over again. So oftentimes that kind of a stimulation, it can affect their patience, their frustration tolerance, and their emotional regulation. So, how do we help with that? So like maybe they start to get frustrated, right? So like, oh man, I lost the game. I lost all my progress. So how do we help teach that and implement more emotional regulation?
Yeah, that's a great example. We do see this sometimes. I've heard this many, many times. The child either loses a game playing video games, or mom or dad says, hey, time's up, time to turn it off. And they go absolutely ballistic, right? We had that happen with one of our kids. It just became more and more difficult to help them get off of the game. And there's a lot of things that could be going on, but one of those is that dopamine stimulation. Here, my thoughts are always kind of teaching them how to take little technology breaks, right? If we're playing video games, let's stop and move. Let's go outside for a little bit and get some fresh air. Let's change your environment a little bit. Let's slow down our breathing a little bit. Get up and move, go get something to drink, whatever it is, right? We can take little breaks as we're going through this process of playing a video game. And that can be helpful. And there's got to be some limits on there, right? Especially if we spent the whole weekend playing video games, probably not going to be great for our kids.
Here's my challenge with summer. I don't know if it'll work with teens, but I like to implement a rule that no electronics until the sun goes down, which is fantastic where we live because it doesn't get dark until really late.
Yeah, it's about what, 9:30? It starts to get dark.
So I think they're starting to catch on because they're getting older, but they're like, wait a minute, come in, it's time for bed. I can be honest and say I'm not 100% on this, but I try really hard as it gets to be nicer weather outside for us and the sun is out and they can be outdoors. I like to implement the no electronics until the sun goes down.
Yeah, which is a great option.
They get real creative.
Yeah, it's that idea of boredom begets creativity.
And then sometimes I have to weigh, do I want the creativity mess or do I want digital that doesn't make a mess? Because sometimes the no technology gets real messy in the house. So you have to be willing to do that too.
And outside. In case anybody was wondering, we have a son who is very into science right now. And I went outside earlier today and was checking on some things, and I found his messes all over the yard, and he's going to need to clean them up. But he's very into baking soda and vinegar causing water bottles to explode, and it leaves a mess. And so, it's fun, but what a great experience for him to be able to explore those things and use his mind and be creative instead of sitting on technology. And I love Selina's rule that she gives us, that no technology till the sun goes down. It just pushes them out, and it shifts their brains a little bit, and they still get a little bit of time on technology sometimes throughout the summer, and that's fine. But that's the balance that we're talking about in these kinds of situations.
Yeah, and it's okay if that doesn't work for every family. Especially if maybe you've got teens and young kids, and you really need a 30-minute to an hour block where your kids are letting you cook dinner, right? So it's all about finding what works. And so you're going to set your toddler or your younger kids in front of the TV. And so everybody's going to have screen time so mom can cook dinner in peace. That's a great balance, to be honest, right? Because it's a little bit of that modeling piece. Or maybe you're doing it just because you need an hour of time alone, right? Hey, I need me time. Everybody's going to go, they're going to watch TV, they're going to watch a screen, and I'm just going to sit and do something purely for me. Okay, so whatever's going to work for your family, and there's all sorts of different ways. So to wrap up, I think what we should do as parents is take a look at our own habits, which, this one can be tough. So how often are we reaching for our phones? Are we guilty of doom scrolling on a Saturday morning when it's a slower morning and there's nothing to do, right? So that
You have
modeling
those?
piece.
I'm kidding.
I mean, in the winter sometimes.
No, sure, we all do, and
Yeah.
I think looking at our own habits as parents is so critical, because how often are we on our kids' case about, hey, put your phone away, do something else with our phone in our hand, or we're just grabbing. Our kids notice those things, and guess what? All of these things about dopamine that we're talking about affect us as adults the same way. We just have a greater capacity to understand and recognize what's going on. We just often don't do it because we haven't been taught ourselves and we haven't taken the time to learn. And so we've got to do the same things. We've got to implement the same kind of processes for us and put our own restrictions, if you will, on creating balance of where we get those dopamine hits.
Yeah. And don't be surprised when your kid calls you out on the hypocrisy. And sometimes it's warranted. I remember once telling my kids, okay, 2 hours is done, that's up. And my daughter tried to say, well, if we have to be done after 2 hours, then so do you. And I'm like, well, that doesn't work. I'm doing schoolwork and dad's working. So, right. And, you have to talk about those inconsistencies and you have to talk about what seems unfair. And you can even say, yeah, I get it. That seems really unfair. And maybe it is, but it's a great teaching opportunity of here's the difference. Here's the balance. All right. So our goal in all of this is to help teens regulate, not to create a fear of technology, right? Or not to demonize the cell phone, not to demonize the funny reels, right? That they enjoy watching occasionally, because it's not a bad thing. I mean, dopamine isn't the enemy. Dopamine is actually very helpful because you know what? Like you said, kids can get dopamine from productive things. Maybe your kid gets a huge dopamine hit from finishing their math homework. That was never the case for me as a kid, but you know what? I got it when I finished my English homework, right? So we're not trying to demonize dopamine here. And that's what we want our teens to help is how do I use my dopamine in a productive manner? How do I utilize it?
Yeah, it's the goal is being aware of healthy rhythms within ourselves, within our lives, and learning to examine habits so that those habits don't become problematic for us. I think that's one of the biggest things for us in this process. And what we're trying to accomplish in this podcast is to help parents teach their children to find the balance and to examine themselves and to be aware of what healthy and unhealthy rhythms in our lives look like.
Yep. Yeah. Absolutely. So, final question for parents. Am I modeling the balance I hope to teach? Really good final question to ask yourself as we wrap up this week's episode. All right. So, next week, we are going to continue with this topic and we are going to get into helping teens find balance in a world of stimulation. And we will see you all then. Have a question? How about a topic you'd like us to cover? Send us an email at mentalhealthpod21@gmail.com.